Of the many incredible artifacts that have been recovered from archaeological sites in Iraq where flourishing cities Sumerian once existed, few have been so intriguing that the Sumerian king list, an ancient manuscript originally recorded in the Sumerian language listing kings of Sumer ancient southern Iraq from Sumerians and neighboring dynasties, their supposed reigns times, and location of the official royalty. What makes this device so unique is the fact that the list pre-dynastic rulers mixture apparently mythical to historical rulers, who are known to have existed. The first fragment of this extraordinary and unique text, a cuneiform tablet 4,000 years old, was found in 1900 by the German-American scholar Hermann Hilprecht on the site of ancient Nippur and published in 1906. Since the discovery of Hilprecht, found at least 18 other copies of the list of kings, most of them dating from the second half of the Eisen dynasty c. 2017-1794 BC. No two of these documents are identical. However, there is enough material in common in all versions of the list to make it clear that derived from a single ideal report Sumerian history. Among the examples of the Sumerian king list, the Weld-Blundell Prism and Cuneiform Collection Ashmolean Museum of Oxford. It represents the largest version as well as the most complete copy of the list of kings. The prism 20 cm high contains 4 sides with 2 columns on each side. The Sumerian king list, it is believed that originally had a wood screw was through its center, which could be rotated and read on all 4 sides. In it is listed rulers from the antediluvian dynasties, before the flood until the 14th ruler of the dynasty of Eisenka. 1763-1753 BC. The list is of immense value, because it reflects very ancient traditions, and at the same time provides an important time frame in relation to the different periods of royalty in Sumeria, and even shows remarkable parallels with the stories in Genesis. The ancient civilization of Sumer, sometimes called Sumer, is the site of the oldest known civilization, located in the southernmost part of Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates, in the area that later became Babylon, and is now southern Iraq from around Baghdad to the Persian Gulf. By the 3rd millennium BC, Sumer was the site of at least 12 independent city-states: Kish, Erech, Sippar, Akshak, Luruk, Nippur, Adab, Umma, Lagash, Bad Tabiya, and Larsa. Each of these states comprised a walled city and surrounded by their people and land, and each worshipped its own deity, whose temple was the backbone of the city. The Sumerian king list records that 8 kings ruled before a great flood. After the flood, various city-states and dynasties of kings temporarily gained power over others. Last mythical Sumer. The Sumerian king list begins with the origin of the monarchy, which is seen as a divine institution. The kingship had descended from heaven. The rulers of the early dynasties are represented as reigning fantastically long periods. After the kingship descended from the skies, the monarchy was in Aradug. In Aradug, Ulalim became king. He ruled for 28.800 years. Alaljar ruled for 36.000 years. 2 kings. They ruled for 64,800 years. Some of the mentioned rulers in the early list, as Etana and Gilgamesh-Lugalband, are mythical or legendary figures, whose heroic deeds are subjects of a series of narrative compositions of the Sumerians and Babylonians. King Etana of Kish ascends to heaven on the back of an eagle left. A bearded figure flies and interacts with a series of celestial circles UFOs. The early list names 8 kings with a total of 241,200 years from the time when the monarchy descended from the skies to the time when the flood swept over the earth, and again the royal sky decade after the flood. Interpretation of the long reigns. The incredibly long residence of the early kings has provoked many attempts to interpretation. At one extreme is the complete dismissal of the astronomically large numbers, completely artificial, and the idea that they are unworthy to be considered. At the other extreme is the belief that numbers have a basis in reality and that the first kings were actually gods, who were able to live much longer than humans. See also, who were the true gods of Eden. In between the two extremes is the hypothesis that the figures represent the relative power, success or importance. For example, in ancient Egypt, the phrase died 110 years referred to someone who lived life to the fullest, and who offered an important contribution to society. Likewise, the extremely long periods of reign of the first kings can represent how incredibly important they were perceived in the eyes of the people. This does not explain, however, why periods spent later became realistic periods of time. Related to this view is the belief that even though the first kings are historically unproven, this does not exclude their possible correspondence with historical rulers who were later mythologized. Finally, some scholars have tried to explain the figures through a mathematical research and its interpretation. E. Harrison, 1993. Relationship with Genesis. Some scholars, E. Wood, 2003, have drawn attention to the fact that there are striking similarities between the list of Sumerian kings and the stories in Genesis. For example, Genesis tells the story of great flood and the efforts of Noah to save all animal species on earth from destruction. Similarly, in the Sumerian king list, there is a treatment of a great flood. The flood swept the earth. The Sumerian king list provides a list of 8 kings, some versions have 10, who reigned for long periods of time before the flood, ranging from 18,600 to 43,200 years. This is similar to Genesis 5, where generations are recorded from creation to the flood. Interestingly, between Adam and Noah there are 8 generations, and there are 8 kings between the beginning of the rain and the flood in the Sumerian king list. After the flood, the king list recorded kings who ruled for much shorter periods of time. Therefore, the Sumerian king list not only documents a great flood in the early history of man, but also reflects the same pattern of decreased longevity, as found in the Bible. The men had a life of extremely long duration before the flood and a much shorter after the flood. Wood, 2003. Life. Why they combine mythical Sumerian rulers with real historical rulers in a document? Why are there so many similarities with Genesis? Why the ancient kings are described as governed by thousands of years? Otherworldly beings with extremely long lives ruled the earth. It makes no sense that a species tangling her true story with mythical stories, and given the fact that the Sumerians were very knowledgeable in many different fields, it is obvious that they knew exactly what they were talking about, which means that these events actually took place. One of the hardest things to digest for some people is the extremely long life of these heavenly kings. Anunnaki. These gods' cargo cult had discovered the fountain of youth, meaning they could not die of natural causes. See also, genetic engineering. In antiquity humans only begin aging sometime in the late 20s, when its cells begin to divide more slowly over time. Cells stop dividing altogether. But an old and technologically advanced species, Anunnaki, would not have problems in modifying their bodies by genetic engineering so that they could live forever. As expected, science can go far in this field and probably are just centuries away from discovering the fountain of youth, also known as immortality. A couple of interesting features of the human body are: a fetus can grow back limbs while still in the womb, and our skeletons continues to develop until the age of 79. The hips widen and skulls increases in volume. So why do we begin to age in our 20s, and why cannot regrow our limbs after birth? It is that our DNA has moderated. Have we been genetically programmed to live shorter lives? were these ancient kings, who ruled the earth, who changed our DNA,